All right, and welcome back, everyone. We're week 3 of Reboot and Thrive, and this is where we're helping you go through this hard reboot right now in our lives, pulling in some new code and helping you thrive right now because you can. This is all a choice. So I'm Christopher Nelson with Wealthward Capital. We help technology employees diversify into passive income producing portfolios. And today, I am very excited to have the one and the only, I Google searched, I don't think there's anyone else with his name, John Vroman of Front Row Dad. So John, do you want to give a quick overview of who you are and what you do?
Yeah, man. In our brotherhood, we have a tradition of leading our intros this way. And that is we're most, of course, fathers and many married. So we're family men first, and then we do our other stuff. And when I'm not being dad and husband, we wrote a book called The Front Row Factor. I travel around, I speak about that. We have a charity called Front Row Foundation, that we're really passionate about. And then the main business is Front Row Dads. And that is ultimately helping men choose to be family men with businesses, not businessmen who happen to have families. So we focus on all the areas of life so that we can thrive at home and in our business and win in all areas.
And that's great. I think so needed here. And especially in the technology environment, right? With technology companies where people are plugged in 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And, I don't subscribe to this concept of work-life balance. I think that we have to integrate work and life because we understand that our work is going to be around, it's going to be constant, but we also have to block out and make time for our life and for our family. And especially now we've been so compressed. And so John, I'd say, as somebody, as we're speaking into the group and people are now forced together living in very small places, how would you bring somebody through, let's say like a boot camp and say, well, what should they be thinking of if they want to start pivoting from being the very distracted dad, calendar's been blown up and now everyone's at home?
Yeah, it's a tough place to be. Fortunately, and I'll say that I'm not in that situation personally where I've been at work away from my family and all of a sudden I'm thrust into working at home. I mean, this is my life. So, my wife and my kids are 30 yards away from me, if you will. And, I think that part of it is, and here's an element of it. We need to stop looking at our kids as a distraction. People will sing.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, what is school really? I mean, it's our hopes of somebody, being prepared to take on life. But really, like if your kids miss 12 weeks of math, do you think that's going to be the thing that's going to crush them in life later on down the road? Or 12 weeks of grammar that they didn't get? Like, no, what's going to crush your kids is the fact that you're emotionally creating trauma in your home, trying to maintain a schedule or idealizing some perfection to homeschooling, whatever. And I think the real crash course here is to go back to, why are you a parent? What type of child do you want to raise into this world? What values do you want to instill? Because if you're winning at math, but losing your mind, or your kids are losing their mind in the process, that's not winning the game. So I think that there's a little bit of a reframe that we need in this, that our kids are not distractions, that our families are really our priority in life, and that ultimately we're not homeschooling. That's called parenting. And so
it is.
That's it. I think it's a starting place.
I think that's a great starting place, right? To reframe, because that's the thing, right? Is we have to look, and this is the opportunity. We have the opportunity right now to look at everything different. I also think, in knowing and hearing a lot about what's happening in different companies too, companies are having to take a step back too. And they're having to say, well, wait, we're having this, and somebody told me the other day about, I think it was a news reporter in Korea or something, where he was giving a very serious meeting and his, 2 toddlers come across the TV and it's out there somewhere and his wife is on her knees crawling, bringing them back. But people are understanding that now we're together and there's a lens that everyone realizes that we're all together. And there's the reframe, I think, is important. And I think one of the things that we're really thinking about now too is, we used to think when, and I left my job in August of this year. So before that I was going office and in home. And we started reframing and saying, well, wait, at first our house was really just fun all the time. Now that the kids are here for school, how do we actually create a bit of an atmosphere of learning? And part of that is, quite honestly, I'm in the middle of writing a book right now, and I'm having my oldest son, when he, for some of our alone time, not all of it, hey, come and sit down, like watch me write this book, ask me questions about this. And I'm shocked that, at 7 years old, he's intrigued, he's fascinated, he's looking at a book and going, wait, you're writing one of these, and where are the pictures? And he's even making me think, hey, maybe I need to put more diagrams in there. But doing this together is, I think, actually making me better, right? And making me think about things.
These are our pillars for Front Row Dads. And you'll see integrated living right there is a pillar, and that's harmony. You talked about like not really believing in balance per se. Well, one of our Front Row Dad members, Josh Lee, wrote a book called Balance is Bullshit. And the idea is that this is about harmony. Here's something we talk about in our dads group all the time, is that this isn't about all the things you can do, before your kids wake up. Although there's a benefit to that. This isn't about being able to lock yourself in your office so that you can do things and not be interrupted by your kids. This is about allowing your kids to catch you doing things, right? Yes. Like, I want my kids to catch me meditating. People are like, how do I meditate without my kids interrupting? I'm like, I want my kids to be, to catch me meditating. Like, I kind of welcome the interruption. Now, I say all this realizing that, of course, we want focus, guys. Of course, there's a benefit of like quality, and kids need to learn boundaries. And it's okay to learn about not interrupting somebody. But at the same time, this is where we get a chance to learn it at home. And if you don't give them a chance to mess it up, then we're not really learning, because learning is about messing things up and then figuring it out. So we have to embrace the mess, and we have to like sort of welcome the challenge and the distraction or the interruption or whatever you're going to label it, and say, this is just a microcosm of a macro mission of creating a kid that can interact with the world. So you want to make it happen at home. Now, we've got all sorts of different strategies about how to get focused. Like, I've got a sign on my door. When the sign is up, the goal is try not to come in. Or when I'm wearing my hat, like that's go time. Whatever the codes are and the rules and the distractions. But the other thing is, look, if a kid comes in and interrupts you, or anybody interrupts you, and you lose your shit on them, that's not, and you gain power somehow in doing that, I don't think that's winning the game at home. No, I think this is about trying to figure out how to live together. And this is all just practice for a bigger picture process at our offices or in the world. This is just, it's literally, somebody else said this, so it's not mine, but it's these micro moments that create macro movement in our lives. And that it's like how you do those little things or how you do everything, not my quotes, but just things we've all heard.
And I actually have an interesting story, and he will just chill with me.
Yeah, that's cool.
And quite honestly, I feel like it gets me more at peace, because to your point, I feel like now we're meditating together, and he's starting to understand that concept of stillness and quiet and everything. So I guess on top of what you're saying, that's the encouragement in the pivot, is invite people in, show people what boundaries are and what you're trying to achieve. Because I also think for kids, and this was encouraged to me by my wife, by my sister, is you treat children as little people. And if you talk to them as little people, they start leveling up. Not all the time. Sometimes they go way levels down, because I have 3 boys, and I tell everyone I'm a glorified cut man, right? Every time I think I've put the perfect situation together, it ends in an all-out brawl. But they definitely surprise me a ton of times. Yeah.
Listen, this also comes back to what works for you.
Yeah.
Right. So one of our guys that came in to present to our dads recently, his name's Akira Chan. He actually did the program called Little Humans with Vishen and Mind Valley. And I asked him, of all these interviews he did with all these parents, what was one of his biggest takeaways? And he said, and I don't remember who was the person he was learning this from, but it's when you finish an interaction with your child, ask yourself, what did my child just conclude from this dialogue, from this interaction, from this conversation? What belief did they walk away with, right? Yeah. If you're at dinner and the kids are acting up and you raise your voice and you're like, hey, right? Your child might walk away concluding the fact that if you're an adult and you want power, you raise your voice. right? And that's what you learn about life. And that's how you get attention. That's how you get power. I can't tell you how many times I've said to my son, like, don't treat your brother like that. And he's like, but that's how you treat me. And I'm like, ooh, you're actually right. I had another moment when I was like, don't talk to your mother that way. And he goes, but that's how you talk to mom. And I'm like, ooh, it's like I love the honesty that my children give to me. Yeah. Right. I love all those moments. But the truth is that we have to ask ourselves, when we are engaging with our families, what is it that our children are concluding from that interaction and that dialogue?
And how do you, so when somebody is joining Front Row Dads, and as somebody is going on this journey, right, there is an emotional shift that people have to make. There is a, and I know, having gone through this myself and getting that, I had the same reflection too, where I saw my oldest son yelling at our twins. We have an older son and then twins. And I realized he didn't even have to tell me. I'm like, oh my gosh, that's the way that I talk to him sometimes. So I reflected on that. But there's an emotional shift that says, okay, I am going to be vulnerable. I am not going to be defensive. I'm going to take feedback as a gift. As you're welcoming somebody into, the Front Row Dads, how do you start getting their head around the fact that you're probably going from an executive, driving the boardroom, having a level of power to that? Yeah.
The truth is, they already have at that point. When they make their way to our group, they've been listening to the podcast. They've gotten, they've gotten to that point. They have a buddy that's in the group that's told them all about it, that they're bringing in. So a lot of times, by the time somebody gets there, they're in a good place. However, we still have an onboarding process to help them get to that place. We have small groups that we call bands. We have our group calls where we get people together and talking to each other. And ultimately we create a safe space. And we have so much momentum now that there's a culture created. So somebody gets onto the call and they'll see, oh, right away, somebody could be really open and honest. And that, because of that open and honest conversation happening, they feel like they have permission to do the same. And trust me, there's guys in our group we have guys in our group that are worth $1 million, $10 million, $100 million. We have guys that have built massive companies. We have celebrities in our group. We have, and we have guys that are none of those things, because the truth is, none of that makes you a great dad. The truth is that all these people are not here to brag about their businesses. They're here to talk about parenting. And, and your business success oftentimes does not make you a great dad. In fact, many times it infringes upon your ability, what you do to be a great dad. I mean, I can't tell you how many documentaries I've watched about amazing people like Warren Buffett or, any of these people that sometimes we put on a pedestal and highlight, and you realize that part of the narrative is they were a horrible father. And admittedly so, and their families are basically like they weren't there. I mean, I recently watched the Hugh Hefner series, which I thought was fascinating, for the record. Like his whole life, how he built Playboy and that whole, whether you like it or not, the point is, it is a fascinating journey of his, but he was a horrible dad. Right. Yeah. And again, Warren Buffett, I just watched his documentary recently. He was not there a lot for his kids. So what I think is that, listen, when my son was 6, here's what happened. I was building a business for the last 6 years. I was writing books and giving keynote speeches, and I had achieved some level of success there, right? I was traveling 130 days a year. I was getting paid lots of money to go speak. I was living a dream a life that I wanted to create so badly. And what I did is I told myself all the time that I was creating a life so I could spend more time at home with my family. Right. Here's what happened. I was at a party and somebody was asking me what I did. And this will go back to the beginning of our conversation. And I know what they were asking. They wanted to know what I did professionally. And I started to tell them, speaking and charity work and the book and all this stuff. And then I cut myself off and I was like, you know what? I'm a dad and I'm a husband. And when I don't do that, I do other things. That was the first time I ever said that. That was 4 years ago. And when I said it, I was like, damn, that feels really good. The problem is it's not true. It's what I wanted to be true, but it wasn't true. Because when I looked at my calendar, I had everything on there for my business. And on my desktop on my computer, I had a folder for everything. The podcast, the book, the next charity event. I had a folder for everything. The only folder missing from my desktop was the one about my family. I had worked on corporate values. I didn't have any values for my family. I had all this, I was taking courses on how to become a better speaker with Michael and Amy Port, right? I was hiring the best people to help launch my book with Amber Vilhauer. We were having strategy calls every day. And yet somehow I thought that my only job was to show up at home and sit at the dinner table and laugh with my family and love my kids. And I had to realize that, look, showing up, loving your family, right? Being there for your kids is not enough. It wasn't for me.
Right.
That was something that we hide behind to say that, look, I'm just pouring all this energy into my work. And the truth is, I was a rock star at work. I got to tell people what to do. I hired and fired as needed. I stood on stages and got standing ovations, and people came up to me at the end and hugged me. And at home, it was hard. It's really hard when a child is crying. You don't know what to do. You can't just defer it to a VA. You're like, I don't like that task. I'm gonna outsource that. And there's a danger of outsourcing.
Take care of this. Yeah.
That's it. There's a danger of outsourcing too much and getting into that game of I can hide behind all the things I don't like and only do your zone of genius. Because at home as a dad, you can't just play the zone of genius game, right? And so the deal was that I was like, why am I not doing the same things I do for business that I do for my family? Why is there no group? Why do I think, and here's the thing. We quickly learned that being a great dad is also being a great husband. You can't just be a great dad and like have this terrible marriage. Like you need to dial that in. That's showing your kids what it looks like to really treat people with love and respect and have this great partnership. It's a major part of being a great dad. So I also looked and I go, no, we're not born great lovers. Most people suck in the bedroom. Most people suck at being great husbands. Most people suck at being great dads from the get-go. So why do we think that we need to hire the best coaches to run our businesses? Why do we need to form business masterminds? But when it comes to the family, we don't have that. So I was like, I'm going to create the thing that's worked for me in business, and I'm going to do it for my family life. And I'm going to have my business mastermind and my personal mastermind, my family mastermind with Front Row Dads. And turns out a lot of other guys felt the same way. And now it's booming. The Front Row Dads podcast is booming. The group is booming, and there's a need for it. There's a hunger for it. Guys want this, and they want to be called they want to be called out, and they want to be called up. They want guys to challenge them. And I've had plenty of guys challenge me, and I've challenged plenty of guys, and I think we all have walked away better dads from it.
That's amazing. That's amazing, because I do think that, being a great dad will have a multi-generational impact, right? Because especially, whether it's one or multiple kids, making that impression in showing them by doing and not just saying, right? Because it's easy to read the cheat sheet and tell all this information, but being able to actually live it out. And you're right, when things are hard, being there and supporting your wife, supporting your kids, it's so incredible. And I honestly think that being in a group is critical to that success. I think that you need to have that reflection and that ability to be able to have those conversations. Because I know in my life, I've been in different small men's groups that have helped me along the way. And I think, having something like Front Row Dads that guys can lean into and have open conversations about, what they're struggling with, right? Because we don't, two things. Number one is I think it's great to talk to your wife about your struggles, but sometimes she doesn't want to hear all of it, or maybe she can't hear it in the way that it needs to be heard from another guy. Yeah.
For sure. Oh, we just said this in our group the other day. We said, listen, stop trying to make your wife your therapist, or stop trying to make your wife the person that you feel like you can just go dump everything on, because that's not her role. Like I was like, guys, your role is to come here into the brotherhood. And if you need help, about something like that, you come here, you get strong with your brothers, and then you go back and be a force for your wife. And I'm not saying don't be open or vulnerable or share like your pain with your wife, but there's a difference of dumping on somebody and being honest with somebody, right? Or having a level of transparency and trust with your partner, but they're not your dumping ground. That's the biggest thing.
And to me, it's quantity. Right. So to me, what my personal experience has been is, because I can play back, and there have been times where I got stressed out at work. I was so full and, just started coming out. And after the first, paragraph that was probably enough, it just kept coming until I just saw her disengage, what have you. Right. And I think what's appropriate is the roll up. Honey, I have gone through this. I'm feeling like this. I'm talking with these guys. I am getting help. And in letting her know that, because what I also found myself, and as we had the twins, our hardest time in our marriage was right after we had the twins. So we had a 18-month-old son, and then we had identical twins. They were in the NICU for a month.
Oh, wow. And
then we got them home. And so then all of a sudden we're really busy. And I didn't realize 6 months later, I started just coming out with all this toxicity and what I didn't realize is the fact is that I hadn't processed the grief
Yeah.
of these guys being in the NICU. That was really sad. And the NICU itself is really depressing. It's hard to be there.
Yeah.
And so I had to go get help so that, to your point, I could get that out and process that, because what I realized is that it was killing the joy in our marriage.
Yeah.
It was killing the joy.
I screwed this up in the last couple of weeks, man. Like with this whole COVID thing, you know, I started to get, I just started to have some concerns, right? Like not even my own, but just about the world and about people that were being deeply impacted by this, and some of my friends that were impacted by this in some really unique ways. And I started to feel that heaviness, and I sat down with her and I started, like, not in a positive way, but I used this as like a chance to really express some of my deepest fears and concerns. And she, like, I left that, she was in tears. She's like, I wasn't scared until I started talking to you, and now I'm
right?
terrified. And, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, I went too far. And I realized that I needed to talk with that was a moment where what my wife needed was her man to show up and say, we're going to do this. Everything's going to be fine. Like, of course there's concerns, like, but we're going to address this. Like, I've got you, babe. I've got our family. I've got you. Like, we are fine. You know, I'm going to make this work. Are there things I'm working through? Of course there are. Are things tough at work? Of course they are. But I got this. I got you. Like that's when she lights up. And, but she didn't need to hear me say, I don't know if we're going to make it. Right. I don't know. Like, who wants a leader that's going to do that? Right. And, oh, so funny.
Well, and it's in it. And to your point, like, that to me is, and I think in a lot of familial relationships, and I think, and we're going to take this back to parenting in a moment, but I do think foundationally, when you're locked in with your wife, your co-parenting is just, it radiates so much better. Yeah. But I hear you that there is a fine line, because I want to let her know, like, yeah, I have hopes and fears too, but exactly to your point, I think it's important that we're able to lead through it and talk about it in a way, well, but I have a plan, I have a direction, I have tools, you know, to keep me moving forward. Because I've been there too, that you know, dumping deep despair right in the middle of the, you know, the bedroom or whatever, it never goes anywhere good.
Yep. Yeah. And we could have a whole conversation about that. And obviously, like you said, you know, here's how it does tie into parenting, is that when you are there for your spouse, part of this is like, you want to help your kids, help your number one teammate. Yep. Because if you dump on that person too much, and then their job is to also be a co-parent with you to the kids, then it's difficult to be great parents. Like, we have to be finding the answers and the strength oftentimes to come home to our families to then lift everyone up. And that's where it does tie back into family. And something else, by the way, Christopher, I want to go back to, which you brought up brilliantly, was that we talk about these domains, and we talk about areas of our life. And I want to go back to that for a second, because you reminded me that one of my buddies and one of our dad members, Mike Chu, says domains force focus. And, you know, if you go back to the conversation we were having about how, hey, should we be locking our doors or engaging with our kids type of thing? Right. And I think that a lot of this is understanding our domain in a new way, and how that creates a focus for our family, and how we can be playful in that space. And a very practical example of this is that, you know, creating areas of our home that are designated for certain things, and shifting how we use those areas for things. I'm right now looking into my backyard, and like I said, hey, if we want our kids outside more right now, if we want to create an environment where our kids are more playful, to instill the values that we want right now, then I think what we need to do is we need to design environments that invite play. You know, design environments that invite in what you want. And this can apply to your marriage or your kids, or this is the world schooling concept of like, hey, if this is the ultimate classroom, the ultimate playground, the ultimate place where a child will come alive, then ask, what does that domain create a focus for? Yes. We even started, like, we hung a tapestry over our TV, because just having our TV covered makes them not want to ask about it as much. You hide the iPads out of sight. You lay the board games on the kitchen table. They get played more, right? You stack the firewood in the fireplace, and it's bound to get lit, right? You do these things that create a domain that creates what you want. You want things to happen in the bedroom with your wife? Lower the lights, light the candles,
Put
set
on
the
music.
mood,
Yeah.
all the stuff, every element of your life. You create a domain that will force the focus that you want.
Wow. I think that's really powerful. And it's interesting because we were thinking about that, earlier in some other conversations. I had a conversation with my sister who homeschooled all of her kids through high school. And so we talked about creating the environment of education. But what I loved about what you just said is you can dial that up and you can look at all of the different domain of play, domain of education, and some of it can be in the same room and it's just time sensitive. Okay, hey, we have the kitchen table, we have all the school books out, now we're going to put all that stuff away. Board games come out and now we're in playtime. So depending on the space you have, you can throttle that up. But I agree with you 100%, setting the tone in the bedroom, setting the tone wherever that may be, so that everyone understands what's happening. The other thing that we talked about, and I don't know specifically what Front Row Dad advocates on this, but sitting down and having a family meeting and just letting everyone know, here's the new expectation. As a family, you guys know things have changed. Walking your kids, I think, and this is where I actually think about the conversation we had a few minutes ago with your wife, letting her know about the fear. We have to walk our kids through this and let them know, hey, here's what we see. Here's what we should be concerned about. Here's what we don't know. And it's okay not to know everything. But also, here's the new situation. Here are the new zones. And this was a big thing for us because our house, coming home from work, it was always, sort of play and relax, except for maybe my office. But now we had to dial that in. And I think walking everyone through that and setting the expectations is really important.
I learned that Easter this year. I've struggled with holidays a lot in the past. I never got to the end of a holiday and felt like I nailed that. I'm the best dad. I'm the best husband. I've honestly got to the end and been like, that was horrible. Like that was a terrible experience in some ways. Being totally honest, right? Like I always say I didn't start Front Row Dads because I was crushing it and wanted to tell everybody what to do. I started Front Row Dads because I was getting crushed and wanted answers. But the truth is that, even with Easter this year, look, we know this about our employees. We know this about our customer experiences. When pain comes from expectations not meeting reality.
That's right.
That's where pain comes from. And that's something that we need to understand about our kids. I sat them down about Easter and said, here's what Easter is. Here's what it's not. Here's how it's going to go down. I was so clear about the expectations this year. I said, Romans are about, our culture in our home is about 4 F's. Family, friends, fun, and food. That's what a holiday is about. Most of the time, right? Now, there might be a deeper underlying meaning, a religious meaning, or whatever it is. Sure. But for us, this is what the core is about the reason that we're taking time today to be together, to be with our friends, to be with our family, and have some fun, to celebrate with good food. Like, this is what we're about. And when I set the expectations, I even had them repeat back to me. All right, so tell me what Easter is. Tell me what Easter isn't. Tell me what the Easter Bunny is all about. Tell me, right? And they repeat, and I'll tell you, we never had a more smooth Easter celebration. And it was all about the communication with our kids, like having that really open dialogue. Now, I get a lot of this is age appropriate, right? And you got little tiny kids, bigger kids, whatever. It's all, you have to do what's right for you and your family. But for us, I got a 10-year-old and a 5-year-old. This worked brilliantly this year, and I couldn't have been more happy with the result for it. It was cool.
That's awesome. That's great. Yeah. And I think that this is, and I don't know, what has been your experience of walking your kids through this whole experience of COVID-19?
Yep. Well, in general, again, 10 and 5. So take that into consideration for wherever anybody else is listening, where they are with their kids. But look, I tend to lean on total honesty, not creating panic.
Right.
Do I believe that it's possible that society could collapse as a whole, right? Sure. I believe it's possible. I think anything that's built, and if it's built and it's not built correctly, anything could collapse. Right. Do I think it's likely right now? And do I think that that's the thing I want to present to my 10-year-old and my 5-year-old? Like, there's a level of honesty of where I choose what I share with them, but I talk about it really openly. But it's more about where they are and what they're curious about. Because I also don't feel the need to have to tell them just so I can label myself the honest dad or the transparent dad or whatever. Right. Like, a lot of this is about, are they curious about it? Are they asking about it? So I only bring stuff up, particularly when they're asking or why they're interested, that everybody's wearing a mask or that we can't see our friends or whatever it might be. And I just tell them exactly in like normal language, just like you said. These are not like, hey, I love it when somebody talks to my 10-year-old and they're like, hello, Tiger. Like, it's so nice to meet you. I'm like, you realize he's 10, right? Like,
right.
you
Yeah,
do not, you don't even have to talk to my 5-year-old that way. You could just use your normal voice in a normal speaking tone. Like, you don't have to be like, oh, hey, Ocean, it's good to meet you. I'm like, no, just, how about just, hey, what's up, Ocean? Like,
yeah.
So the deal is that we just talk to our kids as it is. Like, this is how we believe in Front Row Dads, that like the birds and the bees talk as it's been passed on from generations is not a talk. It's an ongoing dialogue. It happens all the time. It starts, it never ends. It's like, it's an ongoing thing. And the truth is that when we talk about it, we just talk about it normal. Like, we just answer the question. You're not like, well, let's imagine that there's this thing. It's like, no, here's what happens, dude. You know, my son Tiger's 10 now. And it was last year. I took him on a business trip with me, and we went on this epic hike it was in Rapid City, South Dakota, and I was speaking at an event. He was there. It was incredible. We took 5 days. We went hiking. We did this epic, like 8-hour hike up this mountain, and we talked. And at some point, I don't remember, but he had brought up sex. Like, you know, just, he brought it up to me. And so he started asking me questions, and 45 minutes later, we talked about everything. Like, whatever question he asked me, I answered. Like, literally, I didn't feel the need to give him more than what he could handle or know at the time, but it was just honest. So that's how I'm treating COVID. That's how I treat everything. It's no different. It's just be honest. And what I have to ask myself always is, what is the value that's behind the actual message that I'm creating? Because look, there's the words and the facts, but it's like, what value is underneath of that, right? Am I creating the value of, you know, and am I perpetuating unnecessary fear that could be felt through all this? Or am I perpetuating the strength of humanity, resilience of humanity, adaptability of humanity? Like, all of what I want to question and what I want to ask myself is, what value am I conveying through this conversation and this message, and what's happening in our relationship? Because the most important thing is whether or not, you know, whatever you say to your kids, you have to imagine there's a couple of things that need to happen. One is your relationship with your child is the most important thing. So, so when it's like, what conversation do we have? It's like, what conversation strengthens your relationship with them? And which conversation empowers your child to do the most that they can do with what they have right now? Because this isn't about whether your neighbors are telling you that it's age appropriate to say this or that, or whether any program or any expert like myself in the parenting space tells you that now or then at 10 years old, you should talk about this. No. The point is, know your child. And the point is, if you are really, really, really questioning, is this right to talk about with my child right now? This may sound harsh, but I'm going to say it directly. And that's probably that you don't know your child well enough to know the answer to that. If you are literally in a place where you're like, I don't know if I should, that means you don't know your child well enough to know whether or not they're ready to handle that information. So get to know your child better. And then you probably won't have to ask as many times about, should I or should I not have this dialogue right now? It's like guys who run businesses, who know their companies, know their employees, know their customers. They know what's needed when they're dialed in. But if they're not plugged in, they don't know what move to make. They don't know what dialogue to have. They don't know what words to use. They don't know what conversation to have.
And I couldn't agree with you more. And the thing is every child is different. And so, and I'll tell you the experience that I've had, we've had the privilege here of we have identical twins, and they are identical. The one big way that we can tell them apart, number one, is one got a tooth knocked out by a brother. So that's easy. And one's voice is higher than the other. So when they speak, we know who it is. But each of them are different, and each of them have different thresholds of fears and anxieties. And one is more, I'd say, analytical. The other one is much more emotional. Yeah. And so you have to, again, as you know your kids, you know, and I really like what you said, because I try and let the kids guide the conversation. Because I love data, I have to watch myself, because sometimes I can turn on the data, you know, depository and blah, and it's like, whoa. But letting the kids drive the conversation and understanding the differences between your kids, I think is so important because every kid is different.
Hey, you want an idea on that, Christopher?
Yeah, go.
All right. So what I'm about to share right now, not to drum roll this up too much, but what I'm about to share, I believe for myself personally, whether or not anybody thinks it's a good idea, I believe is my best dad idea I've ever had.
Okay.
I have, again, 10-year-old, 5-year-old. I'm no pro here. I'm just a man who's trying to learn. I make tons of mistakes, but this idea I think is my best idea yet. And here's what it is. Every week, I take a picture. I take lots of pictures throughout the week. Okay. I bet you a lot of people do. But what I realized that I could do every week at our Sunday morning, I'll call it a meeting, but it's really just breakfast. But I look at it like the family huddle. Okay.
Yeah.
And what I do is I take a picture, one picture from each kid, and I print it out just on my printer, my Canon $150, $200 printer, 4x6 printer paper at home. I print it out. On the back, I write a note. And on the back, I'll write a note where I call out the strength that I saw in that child in that moment. And I want to bring to light, I want to call up the best within them by catching them doing the right thing, is in my opinion. And so I'll give you an example. One of the pictures I printed was Ocean, my 5-year-old, doing Kung Fu for the first time. And I have this cool picture of him doing Kung Fu. And I just wrote a note. It said, Ocean, watching you do Kung Fu was a pure joy for me. At the beginning of class, the instructor asked you to sit and meditate, to which you sat still, you were patient, and that focus was so impressive, and that will serve you in your life, right? Not only that, but you were participating, having fun, and demonstrating true leadership for the rest of the class. I love you forever, Papa. Quick note, like fine point Sharpie marker right on the back, right? And then what I started to do, Christopher, was I started to do this for my wife, because I would sit at the table and I would hand these out to the boys. And one day I thought, why am I not doing this for my wife? Now,
amazing.
What was brilliant was that my kids started to gain more respect for each other because I was building up Ocean in front of Tiger.
Right.
And Tiger was like, dang, my brother is kind of a badass. And then I was building up Tiger in front of Ocean by talking about how great he was. And Ocean's like, my big brother's awesome. Like, he's persistent. He is a leader. He is so I'm giving them the words and I'm showing them the pictures and I'm bringing those back. You know, you brought up celebrating. This is celebrating the strength, celebrating the best moments. And then we hang them up in our living room. We have the string tied to the wall. We hang them up and we have tons of these in our living room and they're all on display. But here is the best part. So then I started doing it for my wife. And what I noticed was I'd never thought, I always think about okay, how does this tie to parenting? I'm not taking us to the marriage conversation. I'm taking this to parenting because one of the best gifts we give our kids is to love on their moms, to love on our spouses in front of them. So if my kids treat my wife like crap and she begs me for help sometimes, they're so mean to me, right? They won't listen.
Yes.
So how do I help? Well, here's how you help. You catch your wife doing something amazing. You take a picture of it, you print it out, and on the back you write, Tatiana, I love the fact that you prepare these amazing meals for our family. So many people around the world don't even have food tonight. And yet you will work so hard to create this healthy food so that me and the boys are strong. It's ultimately a message of love to her, but my boys are hearing this and they're hearing me praise mom for the food that she's preparing and all the things that are beautiful about her and her spirit and her joy. And now my boys are looking at their mom with new language, with new light, with new love. And it's so amazing, dude. And we've been doing this every single week. Now, I need a name for this. I don't have a name for this process yet. If anybody can help me come up with a name, by the way, I will give you a year membership in Front Row Dads for free to say thank you, because this program, and I've had people come to me and say, I've implemented this, John, and it's making a huge difference. And not only the way I see my family, because all week long, I'm like looking for the thing that they're doing right to take the picture. And then I'm highlighting them. And imagine this, fast forward a year, Christopher. Handing your kids like a photo album or a shoebox or whatever with all these photographs.
Oh, of course.
And imagine at some point, my friend Devin, one of our front row dads, who's a TEDx coach, speaker coach, he said to me, he said, John, he goes, this reminds me that not so long ago, I stumbled upon a box of letters that my great-great-grandfather had written to my great-grandfather. And he goes, reading those letters was amazing. And he said, it makes me wonder that, because he started doing this program with his kids.
Yeah.
He said, it makes me smile to think that one day somebody's going to stumble upon a box of pictures with all these notes and be able to read them and to know the highlight moments, what we call front row moments in their lives. And I date each picture, and I'm so pumped about this process. It's made me better because I catch them doing the right thing. It's strengthened the relationships, and it's been awesome. And it brings about the best of what is in each human.
And I, you know what, I think to me, right, I mentioned earlier that, you know, we want to leave somebody with what is the one thing that you can do right now to make it, because it's action oriented. Everyone can do it. It's so like to me, it's so simple and it's so powerful. And I know I shared with you earlier that, you know, we were doing the, you know, just writing little notes, appreciation notes, but thinking of the structure and the intention and doing that once a week. And it's so powerful. It's so powerful because I think the one thing that I've learned as a dad is that when we can speak words of encouragement and enforcing the good things that people are doing, they will want to do more. And bringing mom into this, and you're right, seeing the boys, it's funny. I can't remember how it came out the other week, but we were talking and I was asking, so how would you describe dad? They're like, oh, Dad, you know, you're fun. Because the dynamic is this, is my wife is the oldest of 4 girls. So she's older sister and I'm the youngest brother. So in that, you think about that dynamic, I am the youngest brother. I'm always goofing around. I'm always joking. So I'm fun dad. And they called my wife intense. And she was just like, I could see like when they said it, she's like intense, but I'm fun and I'm funny. And my wife she's fun and she's super sweet. Anyone who knows her, but she can be a little bit, you know, tiger mommy with the boys. But I think that being able to see her, you know, when she is doing those things and read that back to the boys so they can see the multiple dimensions of mom, I think is so important.
Yeah, that's it, man. Anybody can do it. You can do it right away. Just start it up.
It is. And the reality is I think to your point, the quality of the photos are not important. What's important is that you have a photo, you have a personal note on the back, and you're really speaking in to people, your family, and giving them love and giving them just praise and attention. I think that's so important.
Absolutely. Yeah. And if you couldn't do a photo, there's lots of other ways that you could go about this. You could just take a note card and write a word. Like on the front of that card, just write a word, whether it's resilience or integrity or love or compassion or any word that would describe the quality in which you want to expand on the back. But listen, if we are literally tell ourselves we're too busy to put a few words on a piece of paper to bring love, you know, to breathe light into somebody's life. And it's not that you don't say them. It's not to say, like, you might go, I say them. I go, great. But there's lots of ways that we learn, and there's lots of ways that we hold on to those, and there's lots of ways that we can come back to those later in life. And this is one of those gifts where I've always struggled with, how do I want to journal and how do I want to give my kids, you know, something to take with them. And
that's right.
And this is it. This is the one that feels right to me.
And I couldn't agree more. And I think, you know, thank you so much, John. Like, this conversation has been incredible. I think there's so many takeaways here. And I just want to thank you so much for your time. I want to tell everyone that I think that the takeaway, the one thing that we would encourage you to do is exactly what John said. And I don't know whether it's the, you know, front row family photos or whatever you want to call it, whatever the name ends up being. I think that whether it is the photo or whether it is the word, but giving that to your family, especially in this time, that you can remember and you can reinforce and you can really, really speak into them. I believe that one act will create some changes in you and in them that will really help you be a front row family through whatever we're going through on COVID-19.
Agreed,
Thank
man.
you. Thank you so much, everybody. This has been Reboot and Thrive, and we'll see you tomorrow. We're going to have John Ramstead on, who, leading in situations where you're not prepared. And that's what some of us are in. So thank you so much for joining us today, and we'll see you tomorrow.